What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lumix Live. Today's a bit of a different stream than we've been doing more recently, where, we've been doing a lot of just kind of general AMA, chat sessions. And while this is definitely still going to be a lot of that, I wanted to, kind of take the time because we've seen a lot of people asking questions recently as we're getting into the holiday season and stuff about like which Lumix camera is the one that would be recommended for different kinds of shooting, or which system do you want to get into. So I wanted to take some time this week and talk about just the various options that we have in the Lumix ecosystem, whether it's down in the point and shoots to the G series, the S series, and yeah, just kind of address the questions that people have about that. And across the board with these streams, as you guys have all known so far, these are always streams where also you just ask your questions and we'll get you the best answer we can throughout them. So, so that's the primary thing that we're going to be talking about today. I also want to go over an update that kind of has been flying under the radar for some people that actually just came out for the Lumix Tether software. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to show you some of the cool new things that the software has, which is for anyone that's doing multicam work with our system, it's a really nice addition. It's a really good quality of life improvement in the software for you. So yeah, we're going to talk about that too. I've got a demo queued up to show you there. And then I've got my second camera set up so we can actually talk about some of the different cameras and kind of go through all this stuff. But yeah, so if you're new to these Lumix live streams, these are weekly broadcasts that we do every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time here on YouTube. And they're designed for you, the community, to be able to reach out to us, talk with us, talk with other fellow creators out there, whether they're in photography, videography, cinematography, you name it, and just build a platform where all of us can just have these conversations, get questions answered, and not have to wade through the other social platforms where you don't have an opportunity to actually speak to people at the brand. So yeah, so that's kind of like the core of the things that we're going to be talking about today. I want to remind everybody about Lumix Pro Services. We have the Red and the Platinum tier here available in the United States. Red is free, so if you've bought a camera or you're planning to purchase a camera over this holiday season, know that you get the Red membership for free with your purchase. So you just have to follow the link in the either on the screen or down in the description. You can get yourself registered for the Red tier here in the US. That gets you your 3-day the 3-year manufacturer warranty that's extended over the basic one that's included with the camera. It also gets you into the program, so if you do want to eventually maybe upgrade into the Platinum membership, you have the direct portal already there, and you can just quickly jump up to that. If you are looking at the Platinum tier, the Platinum membership offers you all the same benefits as the Red, but you get 2-day repairs with free next-day shipping both ways. You get 20% off out of warranty repairs, so if something breaks that's not a warranty-covered situation, you get a discount on the repair for things like that. You get annual sensor cleanings and firmware updates and stuff like that. So if you're someone who works in a more seasonal oriented style of photography or videography, so like your wedding photographers and videographers out there, you can send your equipment in between seasons and get it all prepped up, ready to go and serviced so that you're good to go for the next season. We also send out a welcome gift in the Platinum tier as well. So if you're someone who likes the Peak Design ecosystem, you do get a customized Peak Design strap with that. So be sure to take a look at the Lumix Pro Service system that we have here in the United States. If you're not joining us in the US, down in the description, we also have a link to the global portal where, again, you can take a look and see what's available in your region. Throughout the conversation, if you have questions, drop them in the chat, tag at Lumix Cameras. So just type at the at symbol and then Lumix Cameras. That'll just help me see it right here in the main screen here. But yeah, so let's see who we got in here. Pete's here. Hey, welcome, Pete. Dave's Nature, Ulrich, Tommy, Dennis. What's going on, Dennis? And Jonathan's here. Yeah, so there's basically when we look at the entire ecosystem that we have in the Lumix system, we're going to talk about this a little bit first, and then when I get to the box cameras, we'll talk about the Tether stuff. There's the known different categories, right? We've got point and shoot, G series, S series. S series being full frame, G series being crop sensor, and then point and shoots being your typical point and shoots. And we still do have a number of them out in the market. So we've got things like an LX100, we've got our ZS series, we've got our FZ series, and each of them are going to provide a very different kind of role for a lot of us. Now, I think for most of everyone that's joining in the chat here, I'm fairly confident that a lot of us from the years that we've been doing this and the conversations we've had, you're probably looking more in the higher end G series and into the S series, but there's always that nice kind of thing of having a travel companion, a travel ready product that just gets you a lot of the same ecosystem that you're used to. So similar menus, similar controls, all that kind of stuff. And that's really where something like our LX100 Mark II, kind of falls into place there with it. For a lot of the shooting that I do and a lot of the kind of travel that I do, for those that have been following, that I ride a motorcycle. I pretty much always have a camera with me all the time, and I jump back and forth between which ones I want to kind of carry with me. And for a lot of the time more recently, it has been actually my LX100 Mark II that's been kind of floating in my bag or in my jacket pocket, stuff like that. So we offer everything in that range. This camera, you're getting a 20 megapixel image out of it. It's an oversized 4/3 sensor that's in here, so it's multi-aspect ratio. You get the benefits of a small compact with about a 24 to 75 millimeter lens on it. And you're getting that f1.7, so it's a relatively fast aperture within the sensor ecosystem. And for anyone that wants that kind of retro stuff, you've got a nice retro platform, so your controls for shutter speed, all that kind of stuff. But truthfully, if you're someone who's like much heavier into video use cases, this may be a bit of a departure for you. There's no microphone input on this. It's not really tuned for video capture. It does have 4K 30p. You still do have all that kind of stuff, and your colors are going to match really well with the rest of the Lumix ecosystem. But you've got something that can be a really nice kind of companion to the cameras that you shoot with. So, from use case, a lot of people I know, this is a really solid, companion camera. It sits in the bag with the rest of the equipment that you want to carry around. And then, take this thing out when you don't want to actually, lug the rest of your equipment around with you. Let's see, I just see a question coming in here. The question that you probably can't answer: when will the G9 be replaced? Is the GH6 is the GH5 replacement? Mine's still working fine, but things break. So yeah, I mean, you're right. There's not really anything I can answer on that other than, just cameras do evolve. Updates eventually do come out. I don't know specifically about the G9 in particular, but kind of hang in there. Probably the best I can tell you. There's still a lot of, honestly, I think surprising, longevity in specifically the G9. Even up to today, as DDSDSS said, the GH6 is a replacement of the GH5 platform, so it is the evolution of that. But we do have the GH5 Mark II, and that camera really does, kind of shine very heavy in the video side. It is, really a solid platform for someone who wants to do overall content creation. And by that, I mean, if you're someone who's producing for traditional media, so 16:9 delivery, but you also may have clients that want to do vertical delivery. You want to be able to take really good photos with it. That is really what that ecosystem's built for, where the G9 has always really been a very photo-focused camera. And I know a lot of people ask us, the question of like, what's going on with the photo focus from Panasonic? Are we not focusing on photographers, or are we really heavily focusing on videographers? And if you've joined the stream before, I've kind of tried to explain this in the past, but the focus in the industry is across the board shifting very heavy towards what we originally called hybrid creators. Someone who's going to have to be able to shoot some video and photos, and you want to be able to have one platform to be able to do it for you. This idea of a sole-focused photo camera and a sole-focused video camera becomes much, much harder to really kind of justify these days, because there's always those opportunities where, like, I need some video. And to dispel a lot of the rumors that people have out there about, or not rumors, the logic that people try to apply to cameras, that, well, if so-and-so built a camera without all these video features, it would be cheaper. It's just not true. That's not how that works. So when we came out with the G9, which is the great example here, the G9 originally didn't really have a ton of video functionality built into it. I mean, it did, because we're Panasonic. We put video in everything. But eventually, we were able to retool the firmware. We were able to update that camera and provide it very similar functionality to what you see in a GH camera, in a GH camera. But because of the body design, the thermal management goals for that, it was designed more as stills camera. That meant that in things like 4K 60p, you got a 10-minute limit for 4K 60p because the thermals become a big play in that category. So, yeah, will the G9 get replaced? I honestly don't know. But as it sits now, the G9 still has right up there the same image quality that you're getting out of things like the GH5, the GH5 Mark II. There are minor revisions that have happened over the years, but know that now we're on a new sensor platform and a new processor platform. So working with the new processor, the new sensor that's in the GH6, that opens the door for a lot of future things that we can do, whether it's that sensor or just the base within the processors that we use. It really opens a lot of things up for us. So I'm sure exciting things are going to be coming down the line. You just kind of stick to it here and you'll be able to be one of the early ones that get information about anything that comes out new in the future. Let's hear. Dennis says, an LX100 with GH6 internals would be kind of sick, not going to lie. It probably would be pretty cool. For a lot of people, having these, ultra compact versions, I know there's such a large group of people that want a camera like the GM series to come back. And, truthfully, the GM series probably won't come back. It's got a cult following. I could definitely give you that much. But the request of what people want in cameras is so much greater now than it was when the GM series came out. And you still look at what it takes to miniaturize a lot of this technology and a lot of the capabilities while still being able to provide a kind of, like reliable platform. The smaller you get, the much harder that is to be able to do things like 4K 60p. Even in current existing cameras, 4K 60p from the vast majority of the industry is still stuck in full frame, at least in a Super 35 crop. It is very rare to see anything in certain price points get out of that crop region without having to go much more expensive or to a much more bespoke system that has a bunch of other trade-offs like really slow rolling shutter or dynamic range that's not on par with what the rest of the industry does. So a lot of that stuff grows over time, and when you start to get into the miniaturization of products, you work in a little bit of a different bound with that. So yeah, as of today, LX100 Mark II, if you want something that matches really closely with a lot of the stuff that's out there now, this is still a really fun camera to use. You just don't have the microphone. So think of it more as a companion setup for what you may want to do. Let's hear. Danny says, Lumix camera tether support on iPad, Capture One. Anything regarding Capture One, if it is a support thing that you want to see built out in Capture One, you have to let Capture One know. I know I have voiced my opinions on wanting Capture One support. I know a lot of us here want Capture One support, but it is Capture One. We do have the control protocols are available for USB control on these cameras. When we released the box cameras, the BS1H and the BGH1, we did release an open SDK that gives you, basically all the information you need to build a software that can control our cameras over USB. So that kind of stuff does exist. It's up to those manufacturers to hear enough from the community to add it into the software. Capture One, normally, obviously Capture One's a much more photo oriented because that's what it is. It's photo editing and tethered software. And I think with us being very heavily known in the video side of the world, the more photographers that come out and, kind of press on you use our products at, for photography, the more you kind of make your voices heard, the more likely you are to see those kinds of things be updated, over time. So it's here. I'm photo focused. Also, the G9 is my travel camera. That's the whole point of MFT, compact, lightweight, but not image quality compromised. I don't need unlimited 4K 60, but need a battery grip. Yeah, so, looking at that kind of particular use case, where you don't need the unlimited recording, you just need something like if it's got video, that's cool. That is really why the G9 got that update to add things like log and 4K 60p and a lot of the other kind of comforts that come with the higher end cameras. And the G9, I don't have mine here with me. I lent it out to a friend of mine to shoot with today. It is one of those kind of cornerstone cameras in the Micro Four Thirds world that has really held itself over the years that camera's been out. So it's a lot of fun to have that whole thing out there. Let's see here. Just here to see the back on Sean's shirt. Oh, you're talking about that screen cap that someone took of a t-shirt. That's a like 4.5-year-old t-shirt. That t-shirt came out when the S1 series was launched. Sorry to burst your bubble. So outside of, like obviously we've been talking heavily about the G9, there is across the board, we get questions about, like the GH5 Mark II. I'm looking for a GH line of camera and I want to see, is it worth it going to a GH5 Mark II from a GH5, because I see that on the market. And honestly, since the GH5 Mark II came out, GH5s, you can get, in some cases, you'll see better pricing on that if you're looking, if price is one of the more kind of forward things you're looking for. But when we look at, the GH5 versus GH5 Mark II, there are a lot of substantial differences between those two cameras that I think a lot of people miss, because it carries the same moniker and it is just a quote unquote, just a Mark II of the product. And truthfully, if you're someone who uses your GH5 from a photography standpoint, or you're looking at a camera and you want the best of both worlds, you want the photography and you want the video functionality, but you don't necessarily want to go with something like a GH6, the Mark II is definitely going to be the one that you want to go with over the original GH5. And it's really because of a couple reasons here. So one, a lot of us want future support on products, right? We want to know that when you get into a camera or a product, that firmware updates are more likely, that the hardware that's being used is more recent hardware than what was used, a couple of years ago. You want to work on a platform that is a known quantity typically, and the GH line is definitely one of those. It's got a solid history as a platform. The whole GH line does. And the Mark II is basically what happens when you hit the actual wall of development. So the original GH5, I know a lot of people love that camera. I still have a couple of them here that I've used on and off. But that camera hit a wall. As far as the processor that we use in that camera, not really necessarily the sensor that's in it, but really with processing, we basically hit as best as we can get that particular iteration of that camera and the processor to do the things that we know all of you want to see in these cameras as they grow. So with the GH5 Mark II, that's where we added things like it has the deep learning technology built into it. So what you see in the G9, since the G9 came out after the GH5. So it has, better subject recognition. It has a faster built processor, so it is able to do more. When you look at the Mark II, that's why we can do things like red frame. That's for recording. We can add and move the processing power around to actually enable a lot of these extra things. But then on top of it, if you're someone who wants a camera that you can jump from being able to do some live video streaming to working with it as kind of like an IP style camera, to running out as a photographer with the camera, that really is the kind of, not necessarily pinnacle of it, but that is the kind of core one that's in the lineup right now within the crop censored ecosystem that we have. And for anyone that's got a GH5 and you're looking whether or not you want to upgrade, probably the cool thing is that we kept the chassis and everything. It's identical. It is the exact same body as the original GH5, just cosmetically updated in a couple little areas. So your battery grips are the same. The battery itself has been updated, so it uses the BLK22 battery now. So that is just the newer iteration of the battery. Like I said, you still have the battery grip compatibility, all of like underwater housings, all the cages, everything that's out there all fits on this camera. And we purposely made sure that the follow-up iteration of the original GH5, so that we can get a longer life out of development for it, we made sure that it was a core point. Anytime a new camera comes out, there is always that kind of like immediate fear of, well, does this mean I have to buy new accessories? Do I have to buy new batteries? Do I have to buy all of this stuff over again for it? And luckily with the Mark II, you don't have to. It's the same exact chassis. But if you are looking for that camera that, you want a true cinema-oriented camera, you want something that is pushing what a $10,000 camera is spec'd out to do, that's where our GH6 really kind of sits in that category. You know, you've gone through the GH5, you've gone, you know, maybe you've had a GH5 Mark II or your G9, and you're looking and you want to get something that really does just truly flex across the board for the different areas of delivery. The GH6 really is it. You know, you got 4K 120 internally on that camera. You've got USB SSD recording. You've got ProRes internal in that camera. So if you're someone who's really heavy working in post-production, the GH6 is going to be the platform you want to go with in the current Lumix lineup that's out there. It gives you the much faster readout of a sensor, and that's one of the reasons why when we talk about the different categories, why we have a full frame category, why we have crop sensor, and why we have the point and shoot cameras, is that each one has its core benefits over the other. Micro Four Thirds as a sensor platform, or Four Thirds as a sensor platform, is more technologically advanced in a lot of areas than you see in a lot of full frame cameras when it comes to things like sensor read speed, when it comes to the aspect ratios that you're able to record in. We can do the full, 5.8K open gate recording on that, where you have to go, right now, you have to go to the S1H to be able to get open gate in a full frame camera at any long period of recording time. So, if you're a video, kind of heavy leaning creator, that GH6 is going to be your kind of core platform. From a dynamic range perspective, you're sitting there right with other much higher end cameras, and in some cases you're rivaling full frame cameras for dynamic range, especially with the DR boost functionality that we have that works up to 60 frames per second. And then, when you go up to, the faster frame rates, you've got a camera that is actually oversampled from the full 5.8K sensor width to still get you that 4K 120. That's why it looks so crisp and it's really easy to work with across the board. And then obviously all the ProRes functionality. Let's see here. My G9 received more and better updates than its contemporaries. It holds its own even today. Yep, the G9 definitely did get a very very healthy amount of updates, and I think that was a bit of a surprise for a lot of people because it is a photo-oriented camera, but it's got a lot of video chops now. FC, I bought my G9 back in the days to replace my G7, but even today I still use the G7 along with the G9. Yeah. The G7 is one of those sleeper cameras. It's always there. It's always running. It's always a safe bet if you need a good, affordable 4K camera that just works and gets you into the ecosystem across the board. And Tom says, are there any plans to support Blackmagic RAW on the GH6? I really like the support on the GH5S for editing in DaVinci Resolve, but I'm getting the feeling that it may not be possible on the GH6. Truthfully, I don't know what the status of Blackmagic RAW is on the GH6. The only thing that I can say definitively about it is that because the GH6 is using a totally new processor and a totally new sensor that has not been deployed before, that's where development for stuff like that, like raw video data, takes a bit longer for it to be realized. When you look at the S1H, which was one of the first cameras to support RAW over HDMI, that took a lot of time from when we first started hearing about RAW over HDMI to them being deployed, just because of how much time it takes to actually be able to map those sensors, get that information, package it properly, and then be able to have the support structure from the recording side of the industry for understanding what the signal is and how it works. So I truthfully don't know if it will get Blackmagic RAW, given that it's a totally new sensor and with the amount of development time that has to go in with that. And then what the restrictions are on how Blackmagic RAW is created, since it is a compressed RAW format and it's partially debayered versus ProRes RAW, which is much closer to what we all consider true RAW. So yeah, some of that stuff may just take a really long time to come out, but the more we hear from all of you, that certain things like this are what, you really want to see. That's the stuff that we kind of just have to, kind of just press on and see if it's possible. If it's possible, stuff like that comes. If you've been around with the Lumix brand long enough, you know that we may not always be the fastest to respond, but when we do respond to things, especially when it comes to firmware updates, we push hard when it comes to firmware updates. So let's see here. Will the G9 receive any further firmware updates, do you think? Honestly, I'm not sure. The G9 is a bit aged at this point. I know obviously anytime there's newer cameras that have come out, so the GH6 being one of the newer cameras, it gets that system gets the most focus, because that's usually the camera that obviously most people are looking at and really trying to maximize what those cameras are capable to do with the current technology. As we learn and develop things that we can do to the older hardware, then, there's a higher probability of seeing firmware updates. With the G9, I'm honestly not sure, given when it came out versus where we're at now with hardware, because there have been major hardware changes over the years. Things like the fact that the G9 uses the Type B USB 3.0 connection, where right after that was when we were deploying much heavier USB-C and stuff like that. So a little bit of a challenge there. I can't say yes or no, but yeah, it's just kind of the way it is right now. Dennis says, wondering about it as well. Completely new processor, though, although from what I hear, the GH6 is the first Panasonic camera that doesn't burn in the white balance. So, yeah, there's a lot of other stuff, too. When you look at raw data over HDMI across the board, whether it's in ProRes RAW or Blackmagic RAW or, ProRes internally, things change over the years. So, and all of those things culminate in things that add complexity to development like this. So when you look in the Micro Four Thirds system, we are very far ahead in the types of technologies that are being deployed into these cameras, especially within that ecosystem. And in some cases, things like raw data just take longer. Let's hear. Love the new update with multi-view and Lumix Tether. It's game changing. Is it possible to use separate computer monitors to view one camera on each monitor? We're actually going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. I do have my multicam it's not multicam anymore. It's Lumix Tether, since we consolidated all of it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's hear. Please add ProRes LT in the GH6. Probably, I can't say that we won't add ProRes LT. What I will say, though, is that the internal all-intra codecs that the Lumix offers, or that Lumix offers, is a more efficient version and is equally editable in pretty much most programs. So I don't know if you'll see a ProRes LT, because image quality-wise, it may actually be a step back from the internal recording and not actually save you any storage or space. And with modern computer hardware, it's actually not that much harder to work with, if harder at all. But we pass that information on, those kinds of requests. So let's hear. Do you think Lumix MFT is a good system for event photography, conferences and such, mixed lighting, often low light, but I like to be discreet, so long lenses? The Micro Four Thirds system can 100% be a solid event camera for you, especially if you're in the photography side. The big advantage in the Micro Four Thirds realm, if you're coming at this from a photographer's perspective, is that you have a huge breadth of very fast focal length lenses that are native for the mount, and they're going to produce some incredibly, really sharp looking images out of it. Where Micro Four Thirds and all crop sensor cameras typically get a bit of a, kind of smack from the rest of the industry that's full frame centric, is that, they are smaller sensors. So when you look at pixel for pixel, what's the dynamic range going to be in photography, stuff like that. Truthfully, from my experiences, I've shot weddings with the GH series. I shot weddings with the GH5 at the time. And they're solid cameras. They 100% can do everything that you need them to do when you're working in an event scenario. The Micro Four Thirds platform, so the Panasonic Flash ecosystem, which is shared with the Olympus Flash ecosystem, although I don't know if that's 100% true now with OM systems, is pretty well sorted out. There are flashes from companies like Godox. There are flashes from companies like Profoto that have the Panasonic TTL ecosystem built in. So if you're someone who works on TTL for your flashes, they're there. They can work perfectly fine with what you need. If you're someone who shoots in manual flash, which if you don't, manual flash is definitely a preferred way to shoot. So you actually have control over the way the lighting works. There are tons of options available out there for it. Everything from like, those ultra inexpensive flashes that are like a dime a dozen, they'll work perfectly fine with it as long as they have a single center pin to trigger. When it comes to the longer lenses, you have the big advantage of longer telephoto lenses are smaller in micro four thirds than their counterparts. So, if you want to be able to go out there with like a 70 to 200, you can get a lens that's only maybe about that long, and it's a 70 to 200 2.8. So, or 35 to 100 2.8 within our ecosystem. So you're getting that 70 to 200 field of view, and you're still getting the 2.8 for exposure values within it. So your shutter speeds are still going to be able to be held. When you're working with flash in environments like that, your ISO isn't really as big of a deal because you can basically just pick whatever ISO you want and tune your flash to compensate for it based on the shutter speed you want to shoot. So yeah, the Lumix Micro Four Thirds ecosystem is 100% great for photographing conferences, events, things like that. And even in lower light, the stuff works perfectly fine, in my opinion. Now, others may have different opinions, and that's exactly why we all have so many different cameras that you can buy. That's why we have an S series. That's why we have a point and shoot series, because for one, a Micro Four Thirds system may not be what you want. You want full frame? Well, cool. We offer that too. Let's see here. My dog walking camera, easy to use one hand, is an FZ1000, which is a great travel camera, but the tripod mount broke when I mounted a PD capture plate. Do you know if a new 1-inch sensor is coming? I don't know of any new 1-inch censored cameras coming. I'm surprised that the tripod mount would have broken on that. Yeah, that is definitely a surprising thing for me. I've had FZ1000s on trade shows and all that kind of stuff that basically get beat to death, and I've never seen one break. So I'm curious what could have happened there. Let's see here. I have a G85, interested in a newer camera, as it's like 8 years old now. I do long form videos, so the G9 won't work for me. So data for I'm just gonna call you data. It seems like there's not a good newer camera for less than like $1,500. Do you have any suggestions, or am I really looking at needing a higher budget? Thanks. So, truthfully, if you were here for a little while ago when I was talking about the GH5 Mark II, that really is, from what you're describing, you want to be able to do long form videos. You want something that is obviously a step up, because all of us want to put money into something, and we don't want to necessarily have a step back or a lateral move. The GH5 Mark II, at least here in the US, I think it's $17.99 normally. I'm not 100% sure what the holiday pricing is on it at the moment because I don't have that up. But that really would be the camera that I would recommend for something like this. If you're looking where long form video is something you need and you are already looking at the G9, take a look at the GH5 Mark II. Keep an eye out for pricing. It may actually come down right into your budget if you're looking at, like $1,500 and below. Or realistically, that $17.99, a couple $100 more, truthfully, if you were to go with that camera, I think you'd be infinitely happier than, going to something like a G9 and doing a workaround where, since the G9 has a clean HDMI out, you could always record to an external device and not have a record limit, so you can do long form recording. But the advantage is that the GH5 Mark II uses a standardized, where is mine? Uses a standardized USB-C port that will also let you do the power as long as you're using 9-volt 3-amp USB PD delivery. So you would be able to do really long-form video and power the camera off USB instead of having to use an external power source through dummy battery solutions. You get the dual cards for redundancy or for relay recording. So you fill one up, you go right to the next one. So yeah, truthfully, data, the GH5 Mark II is probably the one I would recommend for you based on the little bit of information you've given me here. It said it's just out of the budget, but honestly, if you're able to hold a little bit longer, get that extra cash together for it, it is definitely a really solid investment if you're looking for something like that. And it's a relatively new camera as well too, so. Tom says, my other question would be a GH6 power option that doesn't use USB-C, as my USB-C is now taken for SSD, which negates power bank being used. You would look up the DCC couplers for that camera. with the GH6, if you're someone using the SSD recording functionality, you can use a dummy battery that will allow you to plug into either mains power, so wall voltage, and that's the ideal way to do it. There are other companies out there. I think Tilta makes like a power distribution block that lets you use things like NPF batteries or V-mount batteries, like one of these like FX Lions here, that allow you to use this, and then they act as a power hub where you can plug like a D-tap into. We don't formally sanction any of the D-tap to BLK22 dummy battery adapters because there is a risk of causing damage to your camera. You have to be incredibly careful with that, and if there is damage to it, that's why we don't advise it, because we wouldn't cover that. But there are power solutions that will replace your battery and let you run it off an external source that way. I think it is the DCC 12. I'm going to look it up really quick for you. LUMIX DCC 12. DCC 12 is the one for the GH6 or GH5. DCC. Okay. You'd actually look for, who's asking that? Tom. You'd be looking for the DCC 17. DCC 17. That's the part number you'd be looking for the dummy battery, or the coupler for it. Let's see here. Where are we? Scholarhead, can you please put 24/2394 1080p full frame in the LUMIX S1? Such an easy update. Matching the S5 features would be awesome. I don't know if the S1 is going to get 24p 1080p 24 frame native codec for it. I can ask. I honestly don't know if it's something that's going to come to that camera. Let's see. Are they mainly looking for a camera for travel, for photos and video while hiking? I'm torn between the G85 and the GX85. Luckily, between those two cameras, the G85 and the GX85, image quality is going to be identical between them. It's the same sensor, same processor between those two cameras. It's just different form factor. If you're someone who likes the kind of more flat type retro style camera, where if you're using the viewfinder, you're looking off to one side of it, the GX cameras are super fun to shoot with. If you're someone that likes to use longer telephoto lenses when you travel, I would definitely recommend the G85 or a G95 over the GX series. And that's mainly because with longer lenses, especially like, as I can see, you're saying about traveling and you want to do photos and videos while you're hiking. If you want to use any kind of longer lens, like a 100 to 300 or a 45 to 200, I always found that the SLR styled cameras, so the ones that look more traditional, I know this is not a G series camera, but the ones that look more traditional in their gripping actually are a lot more comfortable to shoot with when you're doing longer telephoto lenses. GX cameras, because they're designed typically for shorter focal lengths, it's perfectly fine. You can do long telephoto, but you just get a little bit better balance if you're using a camera that's designed in the more traditional SLR style. So, Eduardo, my recommendation would be the G85 out of the two of them, or G95 if you want the most current platform. Because you're looking at doing hiking and travel with it, I would honestly recommend looking at the G95 over the G85, because the G95 is weather resistant, where the G85 isn't, if that is something that's important to you. It's a little bit more money compared because it is a newer platform, but it does get you that little bit of extra kind of safety net of using the camera in slightly more adverse conditions. Let's see here. Dennis, to be fair, processing on the GH6 is so much better, less chroma noise especially. I don't really miss B-RAW that much. The image looks textured. I was hoping for a -1 sharpening option. I completely understood on that one. And loving the new color science. Yeah, the new color science and a lot of the stuff is definitely it is nice. Love improvements to GSPix, especially IBIS, and the picture video quality is great. I use Blackmagic 12G video assist, which is why you're hoping for Blackmagic. Yeah, knowing that there's been an increase in people using the video assist products, I can definitely see why seeing Blackmagic Raw would be something nice for people to see there. Let's see here. DxO Deep Prime and Topaz denoise AI is so good that high ISO noise is simply no longer an issue, even with tiny sensors. My 100 to 400, 800 MFT is smaller, lighter, and cheaper. Yep. Let's see here. Computational photography, like Pixel, are there any such plans? Computational photography, in the sense that, like what mobile devices is doing, is something that I don't believe we're going to see anytime soon in the interchangeable lens world. And it's strictly down to the fact that the processors that are used in mobile devices, so things like my iPhone, things like my Z Fold 4, it's a very different SoC than what you see in interchangeable lens cameras. They are completely different levels of what they can do processing wise. Will we see it? I think it would be a cool thing, and I'm sure, engineers and the teams are working towards stuff like that. But will we see it soon? I honestly don't know, because it's a lot more complex to do stuff like that in interchangeable lens cameras with the infinitely more variables to play with. When you look at mobile devices, you're stuck with a fixed lens, a fixed sensor. Typically, you're stuck with a fixed depth of field, so you're not really looking at, what is bokeh going to look like if you're doing multi-shot for noise reduction and all that kind of stuff. Will it come? Probably eventually. Will it come soon? Honestly, not sure. Are there plans for it? I'm sure there are plans somewhere for finding ways to integrate these things. Whether they happen right now or in the near future, no idea. Let's see here. Where were we? Okay, here's one of the questions that came in. When I use a power bank to charge my Lumix S1 while recording, do I have to take I assume that means out my battery, or can I leave it inside? Or can I just record while charging? So the nice thing with the S1, let me just do this. The nice thing with the S1 is that is a system that is designed for power delivery over USB. So as long as your power bank is rated for USB power delivery, which is a specification, and in that particular device, it states that it does 9 volt 3 amp, you're able to power and charge the battery at the same time. The way the cameras are built, you do need to have a battery in the camera to be providing power through the USB port, because the system requires that battery for bridging the connections and making sure everything's powered. And you would want a battery in the camera no matter what anyway, in case your external power source died. But yeah, you don't have to take the battery out. You can't actually take the battery out when you're using it like that. But yeah, just make sure that it says 9 volt 3 amp. That will charge your battery while you're using it and also provide power to the camera. You'll get a little icon on the top with the battery icon. You'll get a little kind of plug icon next to it that tells you that you're actually delivering power to the camera while charging. Let's see here. Where do we go? I live for holidays. Can you tell me which EF to micro 4/3 Metabone speed booster I can use with my L lens on my GH5 Mark II? Is it Speed Booster Ultra or Ultra 7.71? I'm not the most experienced with the Metabones adapters. To my knowledge, they all should work fine. It's a matter of which one you want. If I remember correctly, the Cine variant is a locking mount on the front, where the non-Cine one is just a basic Ultra, is just a standard bayonet lock. Both should work fine. The only thing I remember, and I doubt they sell them anymore, is you want to make sure you're not looking at the one that was originally designed for the original Blackmagic Pocket camera, because that had a rear piece that went too far back into traditional micro 4/3 mounts. that if you activated the shutter, you'd actually break your shutter with those. But that was a very specific one designed for the Blackmagic cameras, the original Blackmagic Pocket camera. Let's see here. I've been using Lumix cameras since I was recommended a GH4. And when I went to get into taking photos and videos of wildlife, and it was in my budget, I had then, and liked it over previous cameras I used. I upgraded to a GH5 when it came out, and I've used it a lot for taking videos and photos, and liked using it a lot. This year I bought a GH6, and I love it in every way over the GH5. Well, that's great to hear. Let's see here. Hopkins Films, also 9-volt 2-amp will keep the internal battery at 100%. It won't charge it up, but it will maintain power. Very true. I believe that's you, Dan. 100% true. You can use USB power delivery devices that may only say like 9-volt 2-amp, but those won't charge the battery internally. It'll just maintain. And even that, depending on what you do with the camera, you can outrun that 2-amp delivery. And you can end up getting slow battery draw because it isn't enough to maintain battery and faster than the camera uses it. Cool. So I wanted to take a minute because like we were talking about before with some of the other cameras that we have, and in the Micro Four Thirds realm, and even in the full frame realm, I mentioned before about the box cameras, the BS1H and the BGH1, and a lot of people have asked us, like, well, with these cameras, what are they really for? What's the purpose? Why would someone want to buy a BGH1 over a GH5S? Or why would you buy a BS1H over an S1H? And for the vast majority of us out there, you may not actually, at first glance, think that these box cameras would actually be really fitting for your kind of platform. A lot of wedding and event videographers, you want to be able to run and gun real quick with this stuff, and you want to be able to have the traditional kind of platform like this. This is my S1H, and the truth is, with the BS1H, which is the camera that I'm using to film myself right now for the stream, it is, for all intent and purpose, it is an S1H just in a box format that gives me different outputs that really are conducive to things like what we do here, where I've got a camera, I want a really high quality video feed out of it. I want to be able to take advantage of a full frame system with shallower depth of field look. I want to have that control. I want to have much better low light performance, so I can actually control my environment without needing a ton of lights. I can have these accent lights behind me that actually show color instead of having to raise the ISO so much that it all kind of gets washed out. And with the BS1H, like I said, is the one that I'm using, we've really heavily had success with this camera in really kind of two major categories. Cinema production, so platforms where you want a camera that's small, compact, that's full frame, that can fit into areas that even an S1H can't, but also in environments where you've got multi-camera studios or remote video studios. So think of platforms where you may need to be holding interviews, or you're a school and you want to be able to show the entire class, or different screens and multiple different angles all throughout it and be able to just switch through them. These are basically those cameras that fit that need perfectly. They're power over Ethernet, so you don't have to worry about battery or wall voltage. It's literally one cable runs into the camera that provides your power and also allows you to control it in software. You can power it over a 12-volt barrel jack that the camera comes with. You can also power it on one of our VBR style batteries, but it does also allow you to do dual card recording internally. You have all the recording functionality that the S1H has, but you don't have a stabilization in this camera. It's designed because most of the time the applications for these, they don't want stabilizers. If you've got the camera rigged up around a car because you're kind of filming in that environment, if you put a stabilizer in there, you're going to get unexpected movement, because no matter how strong the magnetic field is to hold a sensor in place, a car bouncing on a pothole is going to move that sensor. But with these box cameras, and we have the two variants, we have and I keep pointing up like you can see what I'm pointing to. We have the BS1H, and then we have the BGH1, which I've got mounted on my ceiling. And each of those offer a really solid different platform depending on what it is you want to do. And because of that, we've constantly been pushing to update the Lumix Tether software with this. So I've got, it's a little complicated, the shot I have here. So up in the top, point that way, up in the top here, you've got the main camera feed that I've got here. Underneath me, you've got my overhead camera that's just looking at my desk with a bunch of the cameras and lenses that I've got out and some audio recording equipment. And then next to me, you'll see this is the Lumix Tether interface now. So this is Lumix Tether 2.3. And the biggest addition now is that we've added the ability to utilize this software where traditionally you'd have one camera. And if I wanted to change out to another camera, I would click on that camera. It would take a second on the network, pull that camera up, and then now I can control all of the information I need for this camera. So I can do white balance. I can go in and actually control the menu for the camera. You'd have all of that kind of control for multicam functionality. And this is all being done over network. So I've got Ethernet cables run to my two cameras here, and they're just run into my PoE Plus switch, so they're being powered off Ethernet as well. But with the update, a couple of things have happened over the last updates that we've pushed. For one, on the overhead camera, I've got the 45 to 175 millimeter power zoom lens. So I have the ability to actually zoom this lens from my computer here. As you can see, the mouse here, I'm actually controlling the zoom on that lens. I also have the ability to come in here and do things like punch in for checking focus. I can set my white balance. I can set one touch AF on it. So this is like a solid system for being able to remotely control your camera. And then if you go back to some of the previous streams that we've done on Lumix Tether specifically, Matt and I have shown how through something as simple as Google Remote Desktop, I can have somebody else portal into my computer and actually control this for them. So if I'm doing a remote kind of production, I've got that ability. But what's new with the 2.3 version is that I have an updated version of the camera selection here. So I can come in and turn on the visibility of the individual cameras, which will be up to 12 cameras on at any individual instance. And then once I have all of these lit, the eye icon is bright. I now have this new icon here that lets me go into a multicam view. So now I'm able to actually be able to see all of my camera angles at once and know where everything is set up. If I want to be able to go through and select, like, and say like, hey, I want to go to my main camera here because I need to adjust something, I'm able to select that, close out of the multicam view, and say I want to change my white balance. I can take a dropper and change my white balance. You can see right now I'm using face detect for the focusing system here. I can come in and say, hey, I want to go to one area now and just shift it over to one area. I'm able to come in and change all of my different color profiles. For those that have watched a little while ago, we use the Like 709 color profile for the streams, since YouTube prefers Like 709, especially in the live streaming. But yeah, this software, this update makes it so much easier now for multi-camera control that really has been something that a lot of people have been asking us about over the last, kind of year and a half that we've had the program out and available, especially in its current form. Let's see here. I'd love to add a BGH1 to the GH6 for multicam. Yeah, and the fun thing with the ecosystem is that, and I actually have this set up for my wife, because she needed a camera. It's one of the fun things when you work in the industry and it's like, hey, I need a webcam so that I can conference with coworkers or stuff like that, or set up a D&D game when they're all playing. So I set up a BGH1 with that, and that's connected over USB into the computer, which allows the control of the software like this as well. So when she has her camera turned on and like she's working and whatever, if there's, say I'm in a different room and she needs some help because the either one of the lights went out or something and she wants me to fix something for it, I can just on my computer open it up on our network in here and just be able to go in there, fix the settings, and she doesn't even have to touch anything with it. So if you're someone who works in a multicam environment, or you work in a studio where you need to be able to troubleshoot things quickly, the multicam software is a super valuable tool for the box cameras because you've got that network interface that you have access to. Let's see here. Does 2.3 work on Mac OS Ventura? That I'm not sure of. My MacBook doesn't get updated to Ventura yet since it's a work issued MacBook. So I haven't tested Ventura. I know that, what am I on? I think I'm on Monterey. That's how far back I am. That does work, and it works fine. If you download it, definitely give it a shot. Mac OS development tends to be maybe a little bit behind Windows development, because Mac keeps changing a lot of the permission levels and things like that with software. But Mac has also been pretty good that even previous versions of software that are designed for previous generations should work fine. The only caveat there being if you're working on an M1 silica or an M2 silicon, that I'm honestly not sure of because Rosetta should be taking care of it. Rosetta should be enabling everything to work fine, and not have to necessarily have it designed specifically for M1 silicon. So here, Alex says, awesome explanation, thank you. Any plans for Lumix to develop a more powerful zoom lens? We've asked a lot about zoom lens, power zoom lenses. We've gotten a lot of feedback from all of you about power zooms and what you'd like to see in them. And that feedback has been great. We've been able to provide that to our team. That helps us understand where people want to see development for lenses and stuff like that. So at this moment, I don't have any update as to whether or not we're planning to release, kind of future power zoom lenses. At the moment, we do just have the two in the Micro Four Thirds world. But yeah, so I would hope that we come out with more power zoom lenses because I like using them now, especially when I'm working with this. It definitely, kind of adds a lot of ease of use to the ecosystem. Provision Studios, will there be any updates to the S1H soon? Honestly, not sure. Did Lumix switch from Image App to Lumix Sync? I'm using GH5S up-to-date firmware. Yes, if you're using anything that has come out basically from I think it's the GX9 and forward. I might be slightly wrong on that one. The GH5S, the G9, the GH5, they all got a firmware update that adds support for the Lumix Sync app. So if you're using any of the current Lumix cameras that have come out in the last, I'd say maybe, I'd say maybe like within the last 3 to 4, maybe 5 years, you're probably going to be on the Lumix Sync app. And if I go to, actually, I can drop a link in the chat here. The Lumix Sync app, it would help if I can spell sync app. Lumix Sync app from Panasonic. Here we go. Lumix Sync. So the link that I just put in the chat, that brings you to the Sync app website. As you go down, when you go down to the bottom, that has the list of which models are compatible with it. And it does have the point there that recording and image transfer can be done with the GH5, GH5S, and G9 as long as you're updated on the firmware. So the Sync app works that, and any model that's outside of what's on that list, you're going to be using the Image app still. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. For those that are working with multicam and you want to get your Lumix Tether software, the link I just dropped there, that's the Lumix Tether 2.3 software. So you're able to get that for Mac and Windows. And we'll see right now for Mac version, it looks like the formatted version for operations of Mac OS 13, we are still evaluating because there seems to be a potential issue on OS 13 at the moment. So keep it on Lumix on 12.5. Software is developed and works fine up to 12.5. 13 seems to be a little bit of an issue, but if you go to that page, you'll see a link down at the bottom under versions that gives you some information of how the development's going. Let's see here. Yeah, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about is the one that everyone really kind of asks us. It's probably one of the more popular cameras that we've had out, and that's the S5. So aside from everything that we've talked about, multicam use, GH series, all of the different platforms that are out there, the camera that seems to be resonating the best with a number of users that want to get into full frame is going to be our S5. So the LUMIX S5 camera's been out for a little bit of time now. You've got your basically it's a mini version if you consider the external HDMI functionality. It's closer to a mini version of an S1 and an S1H. So it has some of the features of an S1H, which I mean through the HDMI raw data functionality. And then it has a lot of the internal recording functionality that you see in a camera like the S1, though not all of it. So it doesn't have things like the open gate recording, but you do get things like 5.7K over HDMI for RAW. The S5 is the, kind of culmination of everything that we've learned from the S1 series, so S1, S1R, and S1H, in being able to actually begin to miniaturize some of some of the hardware for it. When the original S series came out, so the S1, S1R, and S1H, the size of those cameras was needed for a couple of reasons. One, at that time, in the higher end, the more pro space, the requirement of a camera that was substantial, that was weather resistant to the best that it possibly can be, that was reliable from a thermal management perspective, culminated in what was needed to be built for cameras like the S1H. So for those that maybe weren't around at that point, the S1H was one of the first, actually the first mirrorless interchangeable lens camera that included an active cooling system. So cool air in here, the hot air ejected out this side, and that gave us the things like 6K unlimited recording, that gave you the 4K 60p unlimited recording. All of this functionality was built in with the base of this. Over time, with development, as you can see, like with the GH6, we're able to miniaturize a lot of this technology. Back to that point that I made earlier on in the stream, that as time moves on, you start to get really good at finding better creative solutions for managing thermals, for pushing the processing power further, and learning from the things that have come out in the past. So with the S5, if you're looking for a camera that's got, that needs to be able to have battery grip, well, you got to check there. That's got good battery life. You got that there, especially with the fact that you can power the camera over USB. You've got a camera that can do the raw video data if you are someone who really needs that high-end control over it, and that'll support Blackmagic RAW and ProRes RAW. You want to be able to get a camera that's great for photography and has some really cutting-edge features in it. The S5's got Live View Composite, which no other full-frame camera offers. That allows you to actually do long exposure night photography, star trails, light painting, all of that in camera without the need of software, and you watch it build on the screen. So you've got a really solid platform in full frame with it. You've also got things like our high resolution shot mode with motion correction for that mode 2 option, which to date, if I understand the announcements that have happened over the last couple of weeks, we're still the only full frame camera that does it internally. You don't need extra software for this. So you take the picture once, it's already giving you your high resolution shot mode. You get a standard regular 24 megapixel image with it as well. And it does it all in one shot. So you don't need anything extra to create those high res shot modes. And yeah, it's part of the L-Mount Alliance. So you have access to, the entire line of lenses that Panasonic makes. You have access to the entire line that Sigma makes. Like I have the 105mm macro attached to mine right now. If you were lucky enough to get it early on, we did that bundle with the 45mm. So yeah, there's so much cool stuff when it comes to looking at, maybe I want to go full frame, but I want to get a really tech heavy forward thinking camera. That is basically the camera that you would want to take a look at. And I know that there's a lot of really cool promos, at least here in the US, that go on with it. And I think in other regions as well, there's usually some pretty cool promotions on it, because we're seeing such love and adoption for this platform. People seem to really like this size of body over necessarily the S1 or S1R or S1H. I know that's a very big generalization for everybody. Personally, I also like the larger cameras. I mean, this is my customized S1R that I've got full spectrum converted. I like the big heftier bodies, but every once in a while, having a chassis like in the S5 is definitely it's a really good thing to have. Let's see here. Disclaimer: do not do what I do. Okay, all right. Since you said disclaimer, I had to read it first. Do not do what I do, but I've regularly taken my S5 and G9 out in the pouring rain with weather resistant lenses. We don't say weather sealed. We've had zero issues. Yeah. So with the Lumix cameras, just remember across the board, we build our cameras to be robust and reliable. So you shouldn't worry too much about it. Just know that we purposely don't use the word weather sealed because there isn't an IP rating on the cameras, at least that I'm aware of. So do that at your own risk. But they are weather resistant. Let's see here. Live view composite is cool stuff. It's a great lens idea. Camera's insanely well packed. How much image loss is there using APS-C mode in photos and videos on the S5? Well, so in video, there's not really... I think we talked about this last week, or maybe it was the week before. Shooting APS-C in video mode, there is a slight image quality difference, and that's because you lose the downsampling of the full sensor width, which is about 6K, when you use APS-C mode. In the photography side, there is no APS-C mode like that you can flip into unless you're using lenses that are designed for APS-C, which will tell the camera to only use the center field of view because that's all the lens is designed to cover. And even there, you're not really going to see a major difference in image quality. Some will argue because you're using a smaller region that noise looks bigger, but it's all relative. If you are doing APS-C with the lenses, there's really not going to be, truthfully, in my opinion, there's really not that big of an image quality difference between using an APS-C lens on a camera like the S5. I've done it and had amazing results out of it, so I think you're fine. Let's see here. Where were we? Getting one of my gear right now. Just tired. Okay. I love compact cameras. I like to lift. Okay. Will there be a Lumix line similar to the GX line? Honestly, no idea. And then I use Topaz on some GH6 300 FPS samples and upscaled them to 4K. They make 300 FPS much more usable and cleans up the moire and anti-aliasing. Any response on keeping the file names and transferring photos from Lumix? Lumix using the mobile Lumix Tether app. JC, I have not gotten a response on the file naming thing, other than from the initial kind of searching that I did. Is there may also be a bit of a thing with the phone's OS that's imposing some of that. But I'm going to continue to check on that and see what kind of information I can get for you on that in particular. So let's hear. Wow, that was a very fast hour. So yeah, with that, thank you everybody. I do have to end the stream today already. I'm surprised that it's been an hour already. So thank you all so much for tuning in and all the great questions and just chatting back and forth with everybody. This is what I love about this community and this stream. Everyone jumping in, having your say, getting your points across to us, letting us know what you think of it. Hey, how's it going, Caleb? Just as we're actually ending the stream for today. Yeah, there's so much cool stuff. Yeah, so we're going to be live again next Thursday at 2 p.m. We're going to be continuing some of the conversations like this, so we'll get the link up for that stream pretty soon. I just saw another question that actually is very interesting. What's the best workflow for getting video for vertical format 1080p? Please consider IBIS and rolling shutter in your response. If all you're doing is vertical format video, I don't want to butcher your name. I think it's Asim. If all you're doing is vertical video, literally just hold the camera vertical. you'll be fine. The newer Lumix cameras have a tag in there for vertical orientation noting. That will tell your software that it's been vertical. So, yes, anyway, so with that, thank you everybody. We'll be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. If you liked the stream, if you liked this conversation and you feel that I deserved it, give us a like on the video. If you don't subscribe already, please subscribe. If you know anybody that would benefit from these streams, let them know. This is a community that we want to keep building and growing. It's super fun. And if you don't already, go check out our Instagram account. We typically post a lot of cool reel content, since that's really what Instagram wants these days. And tag us in those social media formats. If you're on Instagram, if you're on TikTok, any of those, tag us. We love being able to share people's content out there and really just tout how awesome this community is. So with that, everybody, thanks again. I know I said that a lot. I'll see you all next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern time, right here on LUMIX Live. Later.